Okay, let's give it a crack. So hello, everybody. I've been sitting here thinking that I just wanted to say completely different stuff to what I had written down, but I think I should just stick to the plan, and then I might end up going off on another tangent. So sorry. I'm from Whakatane, in case I know apparently someone else here is from Whakatane. I live in Mount Maunganui. I'm a packaging and waste consultant, I think, is broadly speaking. I have specialised in compostable packaging, now PFAS and reusable packaging systems. So I've got a huge passion to moving to a future with less resources and less packaging. And I feel like I'm going to rain on the parade a little bit. Like, I mean, it's already raining, but like PFAS has ruined my life over the last 2 years. And like we're here, and this is APA, and we're talking about plastic pollution, but I'm going to talk about why the alternatives are also terrible. And I'm just sorry, I'll just start out by saying that I'm going to rain on the fibre parade. And also, so PFAS, like this is probably a bit technical. We've had quite a heavy day already. So if I see your eyes glazing over, like there's nothing about people in this. And what I love about all the other presenters is when they talk about people, I can really connect. And then when they talk about technical stuff, I like glaze over. So this is really technical, quite heavy, quite boring, but I'll try and make it interesting. So I guess the first two things is a little bit of a whataboutism with the fibre thing as well. So I know that's not particularly helpful, but like we just can't shift from plastic to fibre and expect it to perform like plastic. Like it's not plastic. So to make fibre perform like plastic, we have to add stuff to it to make it more better and work like plastic. So that's the first thing I'll point out, because consumers have got this way of, and we're all consumers, have got this way of thinking that things that look natural or natural in our eyes are better and safe. But in this instance, we're going to talk about PFAS, which are truly not safe. And I think it's important to get into them. So the second issue is that about PFAS is that some of them are polymer or are considered to be polymer. So it does count. We should be talking about it here today, I guess is what I wanted to say. That's what I wrote in my book anyway. So now, go to these notes. Okay. There we go. Okay. That looks delicious. So for the last like six years, I've sort of been specializing in how to get packaging circular, and mostly focusing on compostables. But now I've come to the place where I really think reusable packaging is probably where we should be going with everything. And I've sort of become more and more suspicious about single-use packaging. And this last 2 years certainly hasn't helped my suspicion rates. And I mean, we don't even really know what the ingredients are in packaging as consumers, or even if you were to make a product, it'd be very difficult to find out what's in the packaging. We certainly don't know about the materials consumption or where it's come from, what's involved in recycling of it, and how toxic things are getting. There is a problem with lack of regulation as well. But I thought I will talk a little bit about what PFAS are, but it will help me to know if anybody knows, so then I can know if I need to talk about that or not. So hands up if you've heard of PFAS. Oh yes, great. Keep your hand up if you think that you could give a talk on PFAS. Oh, okay, yeah, I think Helena probably could. Tricia, I think you probably could as well. Okay, so yeah, feel free to ask me for clarification. I'll do the kind of boring technical stuff. What's wrong with me? Okay, don't ask me what these pictures mean. I'm not a scientist, but yeah, I'm joking. I mean, I do know what I mean, but I'm not joking about not being a scientist. So PFAS are a class. It's a class of chemicals, approximately about, or estimated to be about 10,000. Some people say 4,000, but I've heard people say there's up to 10,000. So these PFAS are in a wide range of consumer goods, but they are ubiquitous. They will be in you, they will be in me, they will be in our blood, our wee, our poo, everything. They're everywhere. In terms of food packaging, and in this picture, that is your wide range of consumer goods that are in packaging. I'm going to talk more about packaging today because that's my specialty. They're found in, to be honest with you, most types of packaging in trace amounts. Oh no, I've lost my spot. So like microwave popcorn bags are one that's really demonized. Sandwich wrappers, bagasse, so that's for your takeaway containers. If you pop down to the fish market after this and get something, it will be in single-use serviceware and it will probably be in bagasse. Mine was. And basically in terms of your household, if you were to look in your cabinet where maybe if you're a girl you've got some pretty things, or a boy, whatever you're into, like makeup, it's probably in that. It's going to be in your dental floss if you're so inclined, waxes, paint stains. If you put that stuff on your windows that makes it bead, it's going to be that chemical. So paints, thread tapes, laminate flooring is a big one because it's a printed surface. Non-stick cookware, stain-resistant carpets. Are you starting to feel sick yet? Yes, and everything. Clothing, outdoor, your tents, anything that repels water, if it's a natural substance. So back in the good old days, our canvas tents used to be coated in a thick wax, and that was what would stop the water coming in, but they were replaced with PFAS chemicals. So this is probably what you didn't want to know. I didn't want to know it 2 years ago, but I didn't know that, and now I have to share it with you. So there's 3 things about PFAS that make them kind of different to other toxicants. They're all carbon and fluorine atom bonds, and that's one of the strongest chemical bonds, or the strongest chemical bond known in organic chemistry. That means they're really persistent and they won't go away. They're also very mobile, which means that they go very far distances. So not only will they not go away, but they'll go a long way. And they're bioaccumulative, and they biomagnify up the food chain as well. So it's pretty much terrible. And if it couldn't get any worse, they cause most things that are wrong with most people. And I'm not going to read through these things, but I will say they're a large class of chemicals, but there's only a few that have been studied. And what this means is it's very, very difficult for policymakers to write policy because it's not commonly done by class. So you need to be, especially particularly in New Zealand legislation, you need to be able to point out that a specific chemical has a specific effect. And that's difficult to do when you're considering by class, especially a class that's broken into so many different families within the class. But yeah, it's really bad. I just don't want to go into it in too much detail, but trust me when I say it's bad. And if you want more information, you can watch maybe Dark Waters is a good movie. It's kind of Hollywood. It's a little bit more enjoyable to watch. What I will say is that it's very difficult for scientists to estimate the half-life, and so you sciencey people in the room know what that means. But in the human body, it's estimated that some PFAS have half-lives of about 8 years in the body. So it just takes them a long time to get out of our body, and in the meantime, they cause problems. Let's move on. So now to the positive part, that the ground and environment is polluted by PFAS. I was joking. This is a graph from the ITRC, and if you want more information on PFAS, the ITRC are a fantastic place to go and look. They have all of the research that you could be looking for, and they're great at breaking down the definitions, and yeah, we've just got some really great information. This basically shows how it moves through the ground and how it all ends up in the ocean. That's basically what this graph is showing, and they have a range of these graphs, but in different environmental landscapes and how PFAS moves through the environment. But basically, PFAS can enter the food crops, and one of the key kind of issues to consider is biosolid application onto land, and how the PFAS coming in through the biosolids can then recontaminate the land and then growing food in it, and it's just going through the cycle, bearing in mind that they don't break down at all. But of course, the ocean is the endpoint for pollutants like PFAS. And ocean life is widely contaminated. It has been quite studied right from plankton all the way through to the top predators. Karen Stockin has an amazing study looking at the stranded dolphins and finding PFAS consistently in the livers. And then there's sort of several researchers now pointing out that PFAS float. And so what's happening in the ocean is that they're sort of accumulating at the microsurface layer. super interested because I mean, I know your technology can't look at microplastics, but I would hope that one day that kind of technology could maybe start to look and assess at the microsurface layer and what it's comprising of in some sort of funky technological advancement. But they're sort of looking at that microsurface layer and how when PFAS float, and when microplastics float, the interaction between them and how the PFAS can go into microplastics and the other toxicants like PCBs, and you end up with kind of this toxic soup at the top of the ocean. So it is a pollution, and it is something that we need to consider about. And then, of course, like atmospherically, I saw a great graph. I'm not going to show you because of copyright, but where the bubbles come up from the bottom of the ocean, and of course they burst, and then the PFASs come up into the sky and then move across and then rain back onto the land. So there was quite a popular study that came out a few months ago that looked at rainwater from 4 parts around the globe and found PFAS above the new limits for safe levels of drinking water in all 4 locations, including Antarctica. So it is everywhere, and it is something that we need to be concerned about with our shift away from plastics, I should say. So there are a variety of ways that people can be exposed, and I think you've probably got the gist already, but we're sort of talking about contaminated soil where you're growing food, and then maybe where you're touching PFAS, so it might be through the food, like the packaging, or you might be sitting on carpet and maybe it's coming through you dermally, you're breathing it in. And then equipment that's used as well. They use a lot of PFAS in equipment when they're manufacturing food packaging as well, and other chemicals. So people can also just be exposed to PFAS when they just use products normally. I told you it wasn't good news, but I think we'll get to the good news bit in a bit, sort of maybe. And then paper sludge. Liam, this is for you, the sludge. About paper sludge potentially being quite a big contaminant in compost as well. So, and food packaging is a likely driver of high PFAS, but food packaging is such low levels that it goes into. But one study did find that compost from waste streams that had food packaging had 10 times the amount of PFAS than compost that did not have food packaging. So I guess that does show us that it's an issue. And not all packaging that's compostable has PFAS. Generally, in the studies, when they look at things like big ass, if they look at big ass, it's got high levels of PFAS. That's all marketed as compostable. So you can see the link. Is it all just about compostable packaging? I should be clear to point that out. It's about non-compostable packaging, and it is about plastic too. It really needs. I'm hoping you just believe me, but it is found in lots of packaging. And rather than go into the detail at this point of the day with how many samples have been found at what levels, I'll just tell you that it's a considerable issue, that it's in a lot of food packaging, and they really just need to move away from it being used. But what that does come with, and I'll talk to you about alternatives in a bit, is really a consideration of how we expect packaging to work if we're not going to put PFAS into it. So our expectations of the performance maybe need to change. When we know better, we do better, hopefully. What I think is important to note is that some of the studies, like the diet study, and I just put it up there because it came out about a year ago. So the latest, like the SANS dietary study, they studied how many. I didn't write down how many they included, but they focused on PFAS in the diet study, and they came out saying there's no issue with PFAS in our food system. But they only looked at 30 of those 10,000 PFAS chemicals. And so it's really important to look at how things are being tested when you're considering data to go all the way back. And with PFAS, it's hotly disputed how to detect for it. So it's a big issue in the world. This is a picture of some plastic bottles because I'm going to talk about how it's in plastic now. So we know quite a bit about how it's added to virgin fibre, like in terms of in the literature and also what industry have sort of talked about. And it's added for its oil and moisture properties. So it provides oil barrier, it provides moisture barrier. There's not a lot of additives that have both of those properties. there's lots that you can get for moisture, and there's some you can get for oil, but you can't find them for both. But maybe we don't have as much research. It would be good to have more research as how PFAS are added for processing aids to plastic. And so it's in the literature, so I can share it, and it's open source. And the FDA also, that it's sort of all a bit of a grey area, and I was actually delving into the FDA website like 11:30 last night trying to get like a good picture for you guys, and I was like, oh, I don't know, I couldn't find the exact reference, but I think you're allowed to have up to 2,000 parts per million in polymer, because the expectation is that it doesn't draw out. And to give you an idea, in fibre, the indicator level is around 100 parts per million, so it's a lot more PFAS you can add to polymer. But whether or not it goes from the polymer into the food is unknown, and there's a lot more research to be done in this area. But what we do need to think about is, as we're moving into a circular economy where we're recycling these polymers again and again and again, how toxic are our recycled polymers becoming? We don't really know enough about this technology yet. Yeah, maybe that's enough to say. And we also know that fluorination of polymers exists in a different way, where if you want to transport a really like a material, let's say like a pesticide that might break down the container, sometimes they spray the inside of the container with fluorine to prevent it from breaking down the container as it's sitting inside it, and then the fluorine leaches into the pesticide or whatever, the fertilizer, and you spray it into land, and so you're contaminating the land. So that's an issue too that has been recently identified. And then also recently identified is that PTFE, which is what is well known as Teflon. PTFE was it's just a fluoropolymer, and it's kind of the most well known one and quite highly studied. So that is ground down. They sell a micro and nano powder that you can grind down, and it's dispersed in wax, and then that's used in printing. So any printed product, any laminate or that's a laminate flooring, or like all these things, like they will all have, not all of them, and I guess we don't know how widespread this is, but I've sort of heard different people saying that it could be like, some 90% of products. So I think it's probably quite an issue, but we just don't know enough at the moment, and we don't know what the levels equal, or we don't know how scary it is. So this is kind of the PFAS family, and I have it up there, but I wanted to talk about detection methods and why it's really important about the data. So I recently attended this webinar by the CMA, the Compost Manufacturers Alliance. You know who they are in the States? No, great to look into. They basically self-certify compostable packaging outside the standards. So they're a group of composters. They might run like a windrow, or they might run a ground and vessel unit or whatever, and then they'll take certified compostable packaging and run it through a process, and if it works, then they say, if you run your compost system like this, you can accept it. So it also has to be certified. Anyway, I digress. They ran this webinar, and it's really interesting. I was like, why are these guys delivering this webinar on detection methods for PFAS? And what they found, they did some research around detection methods, and found that they were having trouble getting consistency on the same piece of packaging amongst all the testing labs. Now, the difference was like 37 parts per million up to 1,300 parts per million. So that's a huge difference. And what they found was that it's actually about the sample preparation and the digestion before you even do the testing, and that's really a critical thing. They were able to get all of the labs testing at this and achieving the same thing when they adjusted the sample preparation. So that's critical thinking. And now I hosted a webinar kind of think tank with a bunch of analytical chemists maybe 6 months ago, and we had a similar conversation, but this was all new information. This is a whole new guy that doesn't know any of those guys at all. And these are like the Europeans and the Australians. And like, you guys need to get together. So the international kind of cohort of people who are involved in detecting these chemicals need to get together and get the facts straight when they're looking at packaging. They've got good standards and written standards for testing water, but they need standards for testing packaging. And otherwise, we've got legislation going forward where this stuff is getting banned and we're shifting to alternatives, but the testing that they're using to prove that the levels are low enough is not even standardized. So we have to kind of slow down a little bit. Like, I'm all for getting it out of packaging, but I'm not for the information being used in the wrong way. Or, yeah, you know what I mean? Makes sense. Anyway, so they are developing a standard for extraction, I should point out. But now we'll talk about alternatives. So if you're going to take PFAS out of food packaging, obviously brands and people that are producing products are going to want like a drop-in solution. Okay, what can I just drop in and change in my manufacturing? But the options are really few and far between for them, and they are really costly. PFAS is really cost effective at the job that it does for single-use packaging. It is a fast-moving space, though, I should say. Like, a lot of people are working on solutions, and there are some global phase-outs. There's heaps of legislation coming out in states as well. But in terms of, I guess, what the OECD had in the report was, you know, the likelihood of regrettable substitution could be high if the health and environmental hazards of these alternatives are not well understood. And that is like 100% on the money. So up here, I just picked a bunch of different things to point out, but I want to talk about the technology of the plastic-free technology, which is probably the most widely substituted for PFAS in market in New Zealand and market all over the world. And what you'll see a lot in terms of brands shifting also from plastic or even from glass in some states globally, there's a trend to shift to fibre bottles and, you know, beer bottles and all of these sorts of things. For that to have to be able to hold any sort of substance that isn't dry or oily or have any sort of breakdown, it has to have something added to it. And so what is mostly used is what's either called, it could be called aqueous solution, could be called a water-based barrier coating, could be called what else am I? A copolymer solution or a water-based dispersion. Like, there's a bunch of different names that it could also be called the new generation solution. That's one I've heard that is really widely touted. And what it is it's copolymers. It could be different. It could be from the styrene family. It could be from the acrylic family. Or there's a bunch of different people who send me things all the time. Like, there's one that's come out that's got starch, kaolin, and ricin, ricin. I don't know how you say it actually. It probably isn't said like that, which is actually an allergen. There's one that uses stearic acid as the barrier, but stearic acid is like also the level that they're using it at is beyond food safety regulation. So there's like all of these kind of problems with these things. But the water-based barrier coating is an issue because we really don't know enough about it. And I don't know, Helena, if you talk about this at all in your thing, but so it's basically a nanoplastic, right? Like tiny little, it's all about the definition of plastic. And so the definition of plastic, if you, did I actually write it down? No, I didn't, but if you look on the Plastics New Zealand website, it's all about a plastic or polymer being able to be formed into a solid piece. Now, these tiny little plastic particles cannot be formed into a solid piece, so they evade all legislation or requirements, and they can also evade the description of plastic. And so that's really important because they can call themselves plastic-free, but if you drill all the way down, you know, technically they're a polymer. And so whether or not they're a harmful polymer, or whether we can prove that they're doing any damage, we don't know. What I do know is we need more information before we shift the entire world onto fibre-based bioeconomy, adding in these additives. We might end up in the same position we are now. This is a really important slide. There's no silver bullet. Yeah, it's really funny because when I'm a little bit on LinkedIn, I've got a whole other story about how my Facebook got hacked and all this stuff, and I lost it all, and it's like the best thing that ever happened to me. But so now I spend a bit more time on LinkedIn. I love or hate it, but I always find someone and they're saying something like about PFAS. Wow, I really agree with this person. This is great. And I like their comment, or like give them the curious face or something, and you know, comment like, "Yes, this is awesome." And then they're like fibre and PFAS and it's bad, and then I find out they're like fossil fuels industry. Oh. Well, then like yesterday, I found a guy who was like, discrediting single-use plastics, toxicity footprint, and like, 3,000 tons of soft plastic stored in Victorian warehouses, and if you know what I'm talking about. And then, but then I'm like, that person's trying to sell me like tree-free fiber toilet paper or something. I just find it really hard, because in this space, I guess what I'm saying is that you can find yourself in an echo chamber where people are discrediting somebody, but then they're actually trying to sell you a single-use alternative. And I just think we need to be much more discerning when it comes to single-use and reuse as well. Like, I'm a massive proponent of reuse systems, but we need a lot more information to make sure we have safe systems of reuse that can stand up to 200 washes and not release toxic microplastics through the washing process, or just toxicants into our food and into our environment. Like, we need to design a really good, simple system going forward, not one with a huge supply chain and a whole lot of additives into it. So yeah, I guess I'm wading through the greenwash, kind of looking for the alternatives at the moment. But yeah, the system, as long as the system is set up to produce more and more, it's like we should be shifting to the top of the waste hierarchy yesterday, like, as soon as possible, because there is no such thing as a pre-lunch or a silver bullet in packaging. That's me.
The question was, when you talked about the water bubble first on the surface, then I just thought, right, vaporized thing, thinking about servers, that also powers, fog, smog.
It's into all those things, yeah.
Stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's another way to, right, that we're getting. Yes, no place in circular economy based on this. One of the things I always think about is the packaging. I want the packaging to have the same expiration date. If you're going to do single use, and that becomes a local system. I know there's been some stuff with seaweed, and they're having trouble with the film that only lasts like 2 weeks. I'm like, good. It's going to be locally sourced. And I want to ask you about, about the not fog?
Yeah, those are saying not fog. That's what you're talking about with the seaweed stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm still, they won the Renshaw prize. So
yeah, they do.
At the website, but it's not really forthcoming. And I know that they have a lot of different applications, and one of them they're talking about is the light. And I'm seeing a lot of these, I guess, these fiber-based, they rely on like PDA or the oxy stuff to
the water-based barricades. So totally. I mean, look, there's possibilities that we can have technical solutions to some of these challenges that we face and remove the toxicants, but we're still this is opinion, not based on research. This is my opinion. Bioeconomy is not going to save us. Okay, we cannot continue to justify single-use packaging units, no matter what it is made of, because we have too many people consuming too much stuff, producing too much packaging, too much waste. The resource extraction is out of this world. We need to come back. We need to produce less of this stuff. There's no silver bullet. I do not believe it. And I think the biodiversity loss in terms of monocropping for these products that we're making is not widely discussed enough. It is happening. It is a total global inequity. The global south are struggling, there's no solution to this. Seaweed farming is great, but we need to be focusing on like the global climate change solutions. And
you can't be replacing this, all this plastic with other resources.
I just think that's a nightmare waiting. Under the guise of the bioeconomy, which is going to save us. It's just not.
Because of the straws, I get a lot of this. Like I would get a lot of samples sent to me whenever this was the seed-based straw. I actually sent it to. But one of the things that we have a coalition member footprint, and they do paper-based products. And at first they were doing recycled, cardboard or paper, but they realized it was too much PFA whenever they had the virgin with the kind of sustainable trees. They really I'll add that, but I like that the compost we're getting together.
Yeah.
Really are, it's contaminating.
Well, look, what I think I should say is that it shouldn't be composters' job to process compostable packaging. Like that is just, they're doing it because they want the food waste that comes associated with it. And they're the ones spending so much time trying to figure out what is in this packaging that they're taking and turning into soil for people to grow food in. Like this should not be their responsibility. Yeah, there's some products where it's like a use case for compostable packaging, but until we get really tight regulations and legislations, or until packaging companies will be honest and open about what's in their packaging companies, I do not believe you can expect a composter to spend their time trying to work out what's in your packaging to make sure it's safe for people to be growing food in. Like the theory behind these toxicants has always been like dilution is the solution or whatever, but it really isn't in terms of soil and the ocean. It's not. Like we're talking about what, parts per trillion is what they now have the levels at for the toxicants, and like, yeah,
well,
we can't see them.
Right, because they're saying that all this little bit of exposure over time is actually, this is bad or actually quite worse than we're bioaccumulative.
Yeah, totally. Hi, Tracy.
Yeah, I think that I think the number of things that I think of the more sector, and one of those is about like the practicing and around the world, or Leonardo Cassandre and Jackman, that the society.
Yeah.
Who were on as well, and just talking about those parts of the actually nice of safety, right? It was nice to be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also I'm just so we're thinking of and ensuring that whether it's the top of the life cycle of feedstocks, all the way through to its waste management, if it's waste figures or if it's these need to be protected.
Yes.
And so with the harmonisation of standard
Yep. Yeah, we need to get that. We need to get that. Oh, so Tracy is talking about just transition. She's talking about agreeing global standards. She's talking about a lot of stuff. Basically, I mean, it's all really important, but the moral of the story is yes, we need harmonized standards for the safe levels and the safe levels on this stuff. Like, I mean, I had someone write me an email and be like, oh, that PFAS stuff, like, oh, if everyone's blowing that out of the water, it's like, come on. Are you kidding me? Like, there is enough evidence now, and we have to apply the precautionary principle to this stuff. Like, we don't have time to study 10,000 chemicals to prove that you should stop putting it into packaging. Stop putting it into packaging. Sorry, yes, harmonized standards, detection methods, all of that stuff needs to happen yesterday. And in the meantime, all these scientists that do things differently need to come together and agree the digestion sample, the digestion methods, right, for the samples. Sorry. Yes.
So a quick follow-up question on that. So many, one problem gets identified, and BPA is a good one. There's shifts away from it, and the alternative ends up being just as bad. And so I kind of see this just happening again and again and again.
Me too.
So how do we? What do we do?
What do we do? I know. Move to reusables yesterday, but before we do it, before we rush in, we need like a really thorough study on the toxicity of reusable packaging. And then once we've got the data that shows us which materials are suitable for which applications, for how long, then we just got to go for it. Like governments have got to suck it up. And I mean, it's just politics, Liam. Like it's just politics. It's like, packaging industry, greatest contributor to GDP. We need like a total global shift towards degrowth principles, but not going to get into that. So. Did that answer your question?
Says this is the set of expectations coming out of this, and one of them is this type of study. And we think the same thing with the minister of PPA, because actually this is sort of my range of question to you. I mean, HESO is so broke in many ways, and HESO is substance, and the substance side is pretty real, because even though we have an acts of precaution, what you're thinking at the time is that the triggers for hazard are so high without the research of the we have PFAS politics, you need to have those thresholds, and we see this now in Australia, which I've worked on, EPA to sort of used to regulate things like carbon-fluoroalkyl, which are asbestos like fibres. I just, my question was around, you said something which I didn't quite pick up as my background. Is there something going through
Oh.
in terms of a group standard?
Oh yeah, that was around detection methods, but I didn't really touch on. There's so much I could do. I talked about PFAS for like 2 days, you know, if you wanted to. Like, and it's pretty depressing though. You'll need like some antidepressants afterwards. So in this country, in Aotearoa, we're signatories to the Stockholm Convention. So essentially, PFAS, and the couple that they've just added are banned, but that's like 4 out of 10,000. You know, no one's regulating that, or is it actually, or is it not? Okay, so there's like the EPA, the MFE, and then we've got all of our bodies. There's a current consultation out now until the 16th of February or something like that, which is HEPA, Heads of EPA, Aotearoa and Australia. It's a consultation on adopting a range of different ways of looking at PFAS. It's just it's huge. It's like 250 pages, so I haven't read it, all of it, skimmed it. But what we really need is action. So we need to agree that it's a class first. And if legislation needs changing, change legislation. Watch out for the birds. And then we need more studies. So I work at University of Auckland. There's actually a PFAS group if anybody's interested in being more depressed about PFAS. I jump on that group with all of the university people from all around the country, get together once a month, and there's experts that come and talk, and then they kind of connect. And so what they tell me is that we need science to show that it's a problem in our waters and our soil to prove to MD and MFE that we need to fund studies on this stuff in our country. But for now, they say because we don't manufacture it here, it's probably not that much of an issue here. We know it's in our waters. Karen showed it's in all the dolphins. We already know it's everywhere. It's sitting at the microsurface layer. Just get on with it. I think this is going to be in 5 years' time when we have even more research, because I should point out that all of this research is only 5 years old. We're going to end up with this huge next issue. And then it'll be copolymers. And yeah, like you said, bad stuff. I told you it was depressing. Sorry. Yes, play the devil.
Because here we are on the same page, right? So it's kind of busy.
There's maybe people listening. It's being recorded. Just
if we are thinking on the huge amount of plastic manufacturing, okay? We can't be thinking the huge amount of jobs. If we move into this green world, but we stop making plastics,
yeah.
How can you respond to the loss of jobs?
Yeah, I know, right? We just have to stop doing everything. Just go home, just be with your family. You don't need money, you don't need stuff. Grow your own food, save your own seed. That's just it. Stop freaking driving, flying around the world. Sorry, no offense to anyone. I mean, we're all in the same boat. We've got to transition to a different future. Think about what you want at 2045, 2050. The kids are going to be 22, and then just go there. Yes, I agree with you, but I don't think that I think there's a whole different future we can envision. Yes, reusable is a very labor intensive. They'll keep jobs.
Argument, a lot of this, it's not a lot of jobs. I'm automated. And so we look at we need jobs and business argument. That's wastefulization, and we're actually. I don't want people writing depending on my trash being dumped in their yard. Yeah. That's just bad. Unless I'm a good livelihood and it's toxic and whatever. So let's have the good conversation.
Let's take that to the panel.
I think we'll
take that to the panel.
I didn't think it was them either. It's great opportunity to hear their voices, except for hearing the waste makers and the jobs that depend on all this crap. But when I talked one-on-one with the single community, I didn't want to go to the winter. I talked about this. If you have real money on this every day, you're having every meal out of a job, then let's talk about the toxicity of this. Yeah. Are there alternatives you can do?
Hey, there weren't always straws either as well.
No,
that we can find other implements to do that.
People depend on this. This is a full conversation we have, and we can't shy away from that.
I also just think we can choose to move there, or we will be there anyway. We will have no freaking future in 50 years' time. The world will be burning, so we can either go there or we can be forced to go there. That's what I would say to that. Sorry, but I told you I'm in a dark place. I appreciate it. We'll take.
Yeah.
Around waste pickers and recycling and prevention of waste. And I just want to say, I've come back to recent comment from Bangalore, and I've spoken to some of the waste pickers, not the global, alliance, but I've spoken to large people who get large volume of waste pickers in India. They don't want our toxic waste either. They want us to help them financially and otherwise to transition them away from dealing with toxic waste. So
the greatest act, the greatest activism thing you can do tomorrow is grow your own food, save your own seed, just step out of the system. And like Hannah, a line from Hannah to end on, I think it was from Hannah, or maybe it was from Matt. Would you rather have a job running behind a rubbish truck or being in a kitchen washing dishes? I know what I would rather do. Thank you very much for having me.